Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Asking Humans. Today I'm joined by Faraji Robinson. Faraji, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Faraji, you are the president of Clearport Partners. You do a lot with airports, specifically concessions and retail. You bring a lot of technology solutions to them. You also have a ton of expertise in just like revenue optimization that you apply to this sector or subsector of airports. But I really want to turn it over to you so you can tell the audience exactly who you are, your expertise, your background in commercial real estate and working with airport concessions and retailers, and just kind of what all of this means and what your work exactly amounts to kind of today.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So, Faraji Wayland Robinson, president of Clearport Partners. So, if you think about airports, right, it's like such a cool microcosm of so many different industries because it's real estate, it's transportation, it's logistics, it's government, and then finally it's hospitality at the end of the day, right? And you're doing all of this in this kind of world where you're actually not the focal point, right? People come to the airports to do what? To fly, right? But in the meanwhile, they also need to eat. They need to buy things. They need to, kind of get their basic needs met, grab a gift for their spouse or their kids or something. Um, and so our job here at Clearport is to help people do business in the airport, right? Our tagline is we help people take off at the airport. It's a bit corny, but it's what we do. Um, it, by, I guess, way of background. So I used to run the concessions program at BWI for a German company called Fraport, and kind of won a huge new contract. And at that point, kind of decided to go off on my own. And now I represent a lot of the people who used to come and pitch me to get their stores and restaurants into the airport.
And I'm obviously an outsider here, and thank you for that context. But me as an outsider, the audience as outsiders, when we think about airports and kind of going to just the technology aspect of it, and I'm assuming others mostly think about security when you think through a technology lens, getting through TSA, and ensuring just the airport is secure and safe. But I've also seen these tablets at restaurants. Some of them are quick service, some of them are more sit down. But I'm sure this goes much, much deeper in your world. There's layers and layers of technology that help the infrastructure of airports and specifically concessions and retail. So can you just pull the curtain back a little bit on how these operators are using technology? Are they stuck with legacy systems? Are they innovators? Are they constantly innovating? Are they looking for answers? And that's where you come in. Just kind of pull the curtain back a little bit there.
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? So again, thinking back to that hospitality word, right? Like every airport is kind of like laser focused on having this amazing customer experience. And again, going back to why people are going to airports, it's to get to their flight, right? And so anything that makes that in between time from the time you get through to security to the time you get to your flight better, faster, smoother, easier, less stressful, like that is what everybody wants. And so you're seeing in pretty much all the RFPs these days is airports are specifically asking, hey, kind of what kind of technology are you using to do that? And so we're seeing the use of kiosks now, ordering kiosks. Many of our more sophisticated clients, are investing huge amounts of money into ordering where you don't have to stand in line, you don't have to wait, you don't have to, kind of tap your fingers and stress about, all right, am I going to make my flight? Like, do I have time to stop and get something? Right? Because if you have that confidence that, look, I can just tap, 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 and my order is going to be ready. It says right there, like 3 minutes. I'm like, I'm good to go because I have 4.5 minutes, right? So like, I'm still going to maybe catch my flight. Um, you're also seeing technology just in the metrics, in the analysis, in terms of, how many people are in concourse C, right? What time are they there, right? And that kind of dictates who you're going to put there. Because if everybody's coming from 5:30 a.m. to like 9, you really need a strong breakfast concept there, right? Uh, if everybody's going to be there, if this is kind of more of an evening place, then maybe you have like a nice little wine bar, kind of a sit-down restaurant, kind of something to meet that need. So it really works on both sides, right? So the airports need technology to really kind of develop a program, and then concessionaires need really good technology in order to meet that customer right there.
And that's basically where you step in, right? Like you're essentially bringing your operational expertise and your tech savvy to these airports and to these concessions and retailers. And what do these conversations look like for you, Faraji? Like, kind of again pull the curtain back on that. So there's a need. Like everything you said is very very profound in terms of like, hey, if we're a busy morning airport and there are a lot of people around the concourse at this time, like obviously let's tailor our offerings to the morning crowd, and inversely at nighttime, like you said, the wine bar or whatever evening offering you have, whether it's a nice restaurant, a steakhouse, whatever that may be. So knowing that, and kind of as you just laid that out, insert yourself. What do your conversations look like when you want to take them from point A to point B and really optimize on this front?
Yeah, and so I'll again split that into kind of the airport needs and then the concessionaire needs, right? So in order to kind of just figure out, kind of something from the beginning, like you need the basis of that is just data, right? Like I need to know what I need to know in order to make a decision. Some of that is tracked by, kind of any number of systems that do kind of dwell time analysis or head counts, things like that, right? Which are really important. But then you get into, okay, I know how many people are here. I know typically how long they're staying. I have my flight schedules. In a best of all worlds, everything's really kind of integrated. So, I as an airport executive kind of have a good feel for, okay, how many people are here and, how long they're here for. The next piece of that really is like, well, what do they want, right? And, kind of, it's like, all right, well, they want breakfast because it's 5:30, right? Like that's easy, right? They definitely want coffee, right? So if you're an airport developer and you're thinking about what you need, you always need coffee, right? So
100%.
please find coffee first.
Never go to the airport without grabbing a coffee.
No, absolutely. It's a great business. I love it. But kind of what kind of coffee do they want, right? Like, do they want Starbucks? Do they want something really local and interesting? Do they want Vigilante? Do they want Zeke's? Kind of what kind of drinks are they buying? And so being able to kind of track, both what is selling and then what customers want is really kind of what the airport wants, right? Because that's how they make decisions. That's how they figure out, kind of who gets a space. That's how they figure out what their operating hours are going to be. And that's how, from the concessionaire standpoint, all right, well, I need to know kind of when these peak times are so that I can staff myself correctly, right? I need to know what's selling really well, kind of what's not really working. And I also need to know like what's missing, right? So, like even if I'm doing great, kind of selling like black coffee, right? Maybe if I don't have almond milk, I don't know that, right? But, like a whole bunch of people are just like, man, I really would spend that $6 on coffee if you guys had almond milk, and it's just a kind of a silly example. But it's that knowing what you don't know in order to make decisions, that's really kind of how we see technology as kind of a game changer.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue, Faraji, because I know you're coming out with a blog post about using AskHumans, but before that drops and everyone can read it, kind of just taking a couple steps back and kind of tailoring this to your use of AskHumans. Why for you as an airport expert and kind of operator within this space, why was AskHumans necessary? Why a solution that is like AskHumans, where you're getting comprehensive, nuanced feedback, and you kind of just touched on it with the almond milk example, but just expand on that. Why is something like AskHumans necessary, and where does the industry stand from that feedback perspective from valued customers?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great question. And I first got introduced to AskHumans when I was actually at BWI. Kind of as a concessions developer, we get so much feedback and so much data. We spend, kind of a lot of money and a lot of time, again, trying to figure out what the customer wants, kind of through intercept surveys and feedback and, our own audits. And with AskHumans, what we found is that sentiment analysis and the amount of data that we're able to get is just so much superior to anything kind of on the market, right? And I don't know how much of that is just people talking and that train of thought leading them to places that maybe they wouldn't just, do if it were just kind of a quick checkoff survey, but you really get one kind of richer data where people just kind of, spill out their guts. And instead of me having to listen to somebody spill out their guts for minutes on end, kind of like it's right there, it's transcribed, and then, kind of the back end system, kind of does that analysis. It picks up those keywords, right? It shows those trends, right? Um, so it just saves so much time in terms of kind of really understanding what that 20%, kind of that really moves the needle, like where that is.
Yeah. I always say, and you kind of just touched on it, like a dream for somebody who wants to know what customers think is to go around and shake everybody's hands and have a 2 to 3 minute conversation with them. Obviously, an impossible feat. But also, what AskHumans does is enables that. But then also, like you said, the analysis. Even if you were able to go shake hundreds or thousands of people's hands and have those meaningful conversations about what they like and what they don't like, there's no way the human brain can analyze all of those conversations and come up with the themes and the findings and even like generate reports like AskHumans can do. So I think you laid it out perfectly. And just to press on that a little bit, with your use of AskHumans, were you getting feedback before? If not, this answer is kind of obvious, but if you were, can you talk about the where you were over here from a feedback standpoint pre-AskHumans to kind of where that brought you tangibly with AskHumans, and kind of like how did you measure that?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that happens is there's typically this really big lag when you're doing kind of intercept surveys and kind of this manual data collection. Somebody, and it's usually a third party service, has to go out. A lot of people have to go into the airport and ask a bunch of people, and they get some people, they don't get some people, and sometimes it's really kind of heavily weighted towards kind of one group, right? Like leisure travelers give you more than business travelers because they're typically taking a little more time. There's some demographic kind of shifts around gender and other things that kind of skew data. But you're basically getting this report like every quarter or so. And so, kind of then you're taking a lot of time to then digest this report and look at graphs and like, what does this all mean? Whereas like I can just throw out an Ask Humans survey, kind of right now, and, kind of by tomorrow afternoon, like I'm really starting to get enough data to at least point to, all right, here's some overlapping trends. Like, give me a week, and then that really gets refined. And then I can also kind of look at the outliers, and get some ideas that maybe I didn't have, right? So if, a bunch of people are like, oh, okay, well, what brand of convenience store do you want to see in the airport, right? And it's like, all right, all these people say Wawa, but somebody like, or a couple of people say Buc-ee's. And I'm like, huh, I didn't even think about Buc-ee's. But, again, train of thought, like, all right, let's look at Buc-ee's now. Like, would that work? And then, we can then go the next step and just, kind of poll out, ask humans like, hey, do you want to see a Buc-ee's there? Right. And people will say, yeah, I love Buc-ee's. It's great. They got the mugs and, kind of this, that, and the other. What are those? The jalapeno lime pork rinds. I mean, those are phenomenal. Or maybe people say, not really my jam, whatever. Right. But you can iterate really, really quickly.
Right. Admittedly, I never tried Buc-ee's, so it seems like I'm missing out on the pork rinds.
You absolutely are, man. It's
I'll give them a
like
shot.
adult Disneyland.
And with your pre-ask humans like that quarterly feedback, by the time you are actually responding to that feedback, you're like a quarter or two behind. Like you're to your point with the lagging, it's like the feedback is so infrequent, which means the time to getting feedback and actually having a quarterly report is much longer than optimal. And then on top of that, to kind of compound that negative aspect of it, just that frame of time, you are then acting months and months behind, 3 to 6 months perhaps, onto that feedback, right?
Yeah. And so if you think about kind of like triage issues, you know, there are times when you just need to know something like now so you can, kind of address it, right? And a lot of times that's just a very manual process of people, kind of staff walking the concourse and, kind of saying, oh, okay, kind of this is open, this is closed, kind of just getting a visual, right? If you have something where, people can immediately just, kind of scan and tell you what's going on, and all of a sudden you see five things about, kind of, hey, something's going on at, this Dunkin' Donuts on terminal, whatever it is, right? You can immediately address that and dispatch somebody. Whereas, kind of if you have just a customer service line or if, kind of something is coming through with a lag, like you can't address it like immediately in the same way.
100%. Yeah, and something that comes to my mind with that is like I always see like the burger spots that are in the airports. If your burger quality goes down 1 week, let's just say you have, your feedback's fine. Using AskHumans, your feedback's fine month over month, week over week, day over day, and everything looks great. But then you see for the week of, November 21st, whatever today is, right? It's like my burger quality has gone down tremendously the past 7 days. I have a huge spike in people like who are upset with the quality of our food. What happened this specific week? So I think that's another really strong point about AskHumans, where there are anomalies that pop up in any business, and tracing that back, which may not come through in like quarterly data that you were talking about before, but tracing that back to a specific period of time is super powerful.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And I mean, one of the things, again, going back to that customer service and hospitality kind of focus that all airports have is, if somebody's having a negative, kind of customer service experience, usually you get that through, kind of these one-off reports, right? Whereas here you can really kind of understand like, hey, a bunch of people are complaining about this particular thing, this store is dirty or they had a bad experience, kind of here. And then you can immediately kind of get that rectified, kind of call the operator up, hey, kind of you need to address this immediately, right? And that's good for the operator too, because it means they can address issues before they kind of get to a violation status, which can then lead to a lease default, all these bad, kind of rolling things, right? So you can stop problems like right here and right now.
100%. And even to that operator, once they're notified with that real-time data, they can then start to audit their own practices. Like going back to my silly burger example, hey, maybe they started sourcing their meat from somewhere else literally a week ago. And it's like, oh, our quality's down. Well, there's a direct line, possibly, maybe correlation, not causation, but still that's a pretty powerful and coincidental thing. Maybe somebody new is cooking. Maybe there was a menu change or a new tweak to the menu where that could tie back to a week ago, where now this is rearing its head. So totally with you on the real time insights and how powerful they are. One other thing you mentioned in this blog that's going to be coming out is you call it the modern airport. You talk about how airports have outgrown static feedback, and we've just discussed that a bunch, but really going into it more, I know this is your space, like airports are your jam, but what's unique about them and their interactions with guests where they may be more suitable for advanced feedback, we'll call it dynamic feedback, versus static feedback? Like why airports instead of industry X over here?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing about airports and going back to this idea that they cross, kind of all these lines is at the end of the day, the airport is not just, kind of a business, it's also a representation of that city, right? And so if you think about like Changi Airport, right? Like that's Singapore, right? Like that is your like sense when you fly in there, like, oh, if I've never been here, like this is a pretty awesome place, right? Like I'm into the city. And if your airport is not providing, a top-notch experience, and Nashville is a great example of this, right? Like Nashville's airport got redeveloped and it's spectacular, right? And it kind of flows with, the idea of Nashville as like, a real tier one city now. And so I think, kind of not just airports, but, governors and mayors are thinking about this. Like, what is the quality of my airport going to do for my city? My ability to attract businesses, my ability to attract, kind of new in migrants, right? Like, what is that going to do to the business climate, just the overall, kind of quality of life in my city or state? So it's more than just all right, am I making a few, kind of incremental dollars here because I got the menu right? That's obviously important, right? Non-aeronautical revenue is important, but it really kind of supports like, like Baltimore is an awesome place because BWI is an amazing airport. There's these new terminals. I really get this sense of like growth and dynamism and technology. And this is a place I want to be, right? This is a place I want to come back to. So I think that's what you're seeing. And that's why, kind of all airports are really racing, kind of to have that experience. I mean, if you look at any RFP that comes out, right, it's like customer experience is either number one or number two. It's like money, customer experience, and that's it, right? And I think that's why, kind of AskHumans and tools like that are so important, because they really do help to, kind of not just, kind of give you more money, but give you that customer experience that just makes you want to come back to, or come to the first time to a city, not just to that airport.
Yeah. That's exactly why I want to have you on today, because everything you just said is seemingly so obvious, but it's really not, because as you were saying it, I just started going through every airport I've ever been in my head. And it's like, wow, like they do such a great job and they're so proud of like they put out there purposely like we're a great city. Whatever city you're flying into, we're great. This is who we are. These are our values. Like this is, memorabilia or just like sites from around the city, like the iconography all around the airport. And it's like that's more than just trying to like have a aesthetically pleasing looking terminal. That's like it cuts into a deeper psychology where it's like this is who we are. This is why we've invested so much money into our new terminal, because we want to be a this is the first stop you get when you get into the city. You hop off the plane and here you are in our airport, and we want to be that representation of who we are as a city. And that obviously goes into like the economic development of the city and attracting tourism. So everything you said on its face is seemingly really, really clear and obvious, but now I'm just realizing more and more and more that this is really like their their window into the city, these airports.
Yeah, it's kind of it can be, at least at its best, it's a trophy, right? It is, kind of this big shining, kind of monument to the city, to its people, to its culture, to its values. And there's this opportunity, I think, to really, kind of like highlight and showcase that, right? Like, going back to Nashville, like there are, kind of musicians in the restaurants, like, kind of local musicians just playing, kind of music. It's amazing, right? Like you feel like if you land there and you've never been to Nashville before, if you've never heard of Nashville, you would say,
Now you're in
wow,
Nashville.
this is a music city, right? Like I get it. I get what this city is about, right? If you were just blindfolded and came from Mars, you would walk in there and say, okay, this is a musical city. I'm seeing something here that makes sense, right? Kind of if you go to like Dubai airport, you're like, oh, this is a shopping city, right? Like, kind of this is very high end. There's, kind of the gold bazaar, right? Like, kind of there's a Rolex right here. If you go to like, kind of LAX to Tibet, right, which is Tom Bradley International, there's an Hermès there, right? Like, kind of there are all these really high end, beautiful, kind of restaurants and shops. And, obviously there's a food court there too, but there's still like, this is LA, right? Kind of this is where I am.
There's sometimes a frustration with concessions and retail at airports. It could be the price of things. I paid $20 for this, where if I wasn't in an airport, I would have paid $5 for it. And obviously that goes to the demand of, hey, you're in an airport. There's not really much anywhere else to go to get this. So yeah, here you are, and the price is reflected in that. But not only with price, there's also just preferences and options. Hey, I wish this airport had this or had more of this and less of that. So when you look at the future of airports with dynamic feedback incorporated, what does that future look like? Kind of that utopia where an airport and its concessions and retailers have fully optimized feedback programs that are incorporating those different perspectives in real time, instead of that kind of non-insightful static feedback that they have now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like everything else where the airport starts to get to know you and what you like, right? And I think, kind of we can really use technology to make things much more seamless where we can, right? Like, so you can get through TSA quicker now, kind of you just, kind of lean in there, kind of takes that snapshot of your face, recognizes who you are. All right, boom, kind of your pre-check, you don't have to take your shoes off, you're good to go, right? So you save a little bit of time and space and energy there, right? And then it's like, all right, well, I'm hungry, right? So like, all airports now usually have some form of delivery or ordering mechanism where, as opposed to, kind of trying to figure out, all right, like I know I'm in, gate C14, all right, kind of what's there, right? Like, yes, I have signage, but I also have my phone, right? And so I can just, kind of open up and say, all right, what's here? How long is it going to take? Kind of do I have time? And I can really decrease my own stress level because, I don't have that anxiety of not knowing, right? And, I think as we go forward, it just gets to a point where it's just a suggestion machine, right? It's a recommendation engine. It's like, look, I like spicy food. And so like, you're going to point me to like, kind of there's a local Mexican place and it's going to take me about 15 minutes, and my flight leaves in 45. That gives me time, right? I'm good to go here. So I think that's where we get to is, kind of this really personalized experience, kind of where there's like this immediacy of, all right, I know what's happening like on the map, and, kind of I know what's happening with my flight, and I know what's happening with my belly, right? So like those are the things that I need.
That's a future that I would look forward to in an airport, just to be clear.
We're
Faraji,
making it happen, Brian, every day.
there we go. Faraji, before we wrap up, I want you to tell the audience where they could find you, where they could find Clearport, whether LinkedIn, you have any other socials that you want to plug. The floor is yours. Shout it
Yeah.
out.
You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Instagram and Threads at Clearport Partners. And then our website is flyclearport.com. And you can find out more about the concessions business, more about what we do, more about some of our insights. And if you're looking to get into an airport, kind of whatever your business is, whether it's concessions, technology, construction, et cetera, we can provide you a roadmap in our advisory right there.
Awesome. All right, Faraji. Thank you. I appreciate you coming.